Okay, everyone. In this tutorial, I'm going to show you how to bring in a SketchUp file. So Revit recognizes it as a mass, and you can run, solar analysis, energy analysis on it. Um, Obviously, this is probably something more for the main project that will be starting in week 3. If you did your design for your kiosk in SketchUp. This is a way that you could bring in that design as a mass and then quickly run a solar analysis, because I did notice that some of you that I was looking around on Friday started to do some design work in SketchUp. So this is kind of a way that you could bring it in, and if you want to do like a solar analysis on that design of your kiosk, you could. Or you can just use it to practice bringing in stuff from SketchUp if you wanted to. But you may have noticed back in tutorial B when I imported the CAD file from, to actually kind of create the site plan. If you go back to import CAD and you drop down on the file types, you can see the type of files that you can import into Revit. Obviously, DWGs and DXS are the two mains. You can import an SAT file, and then you can also import a DGN file. Don't really know what program uses that. AutoCAD may be able to export to that, but I really don't know. I mean, obviously, if you're in AutoCAD, you can export as just a DWG. But one of the files is a SketchUp file, types. So obviously, you can do a SketchUp type, to import. If some of you know Rhino and like to use Rhino actually exports as a SketchUp file. So that's how you would actually get from Rhino into Revit. You export it from Rhino as a SketchUp file, and then you bring it in to a Revit that way. However, if you just import a SketchUp file through this, but just through here, that's when Revit kind of just recognizes it as kind of like an imported CAD entity, kind of like the site plan DWG that I imported. But there's a special way that you have to import like a 3D model like that, so Revit recognizes it as a mass. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to go to SketchUp. And when I save as SketchUp, you actually have to save it as a specific type of SketchUp. The SketchUp models, and then I believe 2013 to 2015 versions, Revit is not compatible with. 2013 may be compatible, but I know version 8 works all the time, so I just usually use version 8. I may have tested 2013, but I forgot if it works or not. So when you go to save your SketchUp file, always just save it as a version 8, and that way you'll be able to import it. So I'm going to save it to the desktop so I can find it. And now once it's saved, so basically you're kind of do the same thing that I showed in tutorial 2, where you go to master and site and you do an in-place mass. And then you can name it if you wanted to name it something. Now when you're in an in-place mass, instead of actually drawing it, you can see that you have an insert tab, and this is where you now import your SketchUp file. And this is when Revit will now recognize it as a mass. And then obviously you may need to move it. It's pinned, so move it. Person came into. Sometimes you'll get this or mesh geometry. I believe the mesh is this, and maybe the faces of the circle. Because Revit kind of work, you'll see here, if you see the difference between SketchUp and Revit, you see how it has the flush circle here. Revit doesn't really recognize circles. I don't know if you guys start to play around with Revit, you'll notice that. But it kind of has a real world scenario where materials aren't really circular. They're more kind of, little jogs. It's kind of more like a pentagon, but with, 100 sides, so it looks like a circle. Obviously, there's not 100 sides here, But that's kind of how Revit works. You'll notice it a lot more if you start to do curtain walls, because obviously Revit it doesn't do curtain walls that are circular. Yeah, obviously there's a circular button to do a circular curtain wall, but you'll see it does it like this, where it does little jogs. So it's really kind of more of like a nth-sided, kind of solid that it's so small that when you zoom out, it looks like a circle. So that could be where the mesh geometry was coming in. But now this is a mass, and you can see that it's a mass. So if you did an energy analysis on it, which will be the next coming videos, it'll work. But also, if you go back to the mass on the site, and I pick on wall, I can now pick these surfaces to add walls to them. So that's something where, and then even like a roof, I can go back to that and pick roof and add a roof, and create the roof, and now a roof's created. Let me see if it'll work for the circle. See how? Yeah. See, yeah. So I can only click the top of the circle. So it won't let me click around because it was a mesh geometry. So that's kind of like a down. So a lot of times curves may not come through. But the nice thing with SketchUp bringing that in is obviously you could use that as kind of like a template kind of thing, where you could use that to trace an actual circle that you draw in Revit, so it would be recognized that way. But so like if you notice, I just want to show you the difference. So if I delete that out, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to import the CAD so I'm not in anything active, and I'm just going to go to the Insert tab and import the file. So now this is without doing it as a mass, and then you can see if I go to the mass and Site tab, I can't pick those spaces because it's not recognized as a mass. So again, when you want to do it as a mass, you go to the Master and Site tab first, activate the In Place Mass tool, then go to the Insert tab, import CAD, then find whatever your file is. It comes in, you may have to move it after it comes in if you want it to be specifically located somewhere and you're trying to see what it looks like compared to the rest of the stuff. And then, like I said, the main thing for this purpose is if you guys start to do some concept designs in Revit for the main building, that's going to start in week 3, or if you wanted to bring in any designs that you may have done for your kiosk already, you could, bring it in and run some energy analysis, and, those will be in the next videos that will be run. And I'll probably do, when I show some of the analysis stuff, I'll probably bring in the SketchUp one just to show you, that it does work for it when you bring it in. So another good thing about this too, is if you have done, some of the design in SketchUp as well, you could also bring it in and then use, these tools to, if you go to the Master and Site and use these tools to add walls and stuff, since you already had it started, that's something that's kind of helpful as well. So that's pretty much it for importing SketchUp into Revit. So it's a mass. So that's going to end this video, and then the next video I am going to show you how to export out of Revit into like an STL file, so you can bring it into the to make a bar, so 3D print, or it's going to be something that we use for the wind analysis portion as well, but that's going to be actually like another video part of this tutorial.